While the potatoes were boiling, I walked around the Lykovskoye estate. It was located at a carefully, and, probably, not immediately chosen point. Away from the river and high enough on the mountain. The estate was safely hidden from any casual eye. The place was protected from the wind by the folds of the mountains and taiga. Next to the dwelling is a cold, clean stream. Larch, spruce, cedar, and birch stands give people everything they could take here. The beast is not frightened by anyone. Blueberries and raspberries are nearby, firewood is nearby, cedar cones fall right on the roof of the house. Here is perhaps an inconvenience for the garden. Not too gentle slope. But look how thickly the potatoes are turning green. And the rye was already full, the pods on the peas were swollen. I suddenly stopped at the thought that I was looking at this hotbed of life through the eyes of a summer resident. But there is no train here. It is not an hour's journey to the nearest light, to a human handshake, but 250 kilometers of impassable taiga. And a person has not been here for 30 days, but for more than 30 years. What kind of labor did you get bread and warmth here? Did you suddenly have a desire to gain wings and fly somewhere? Near the house, I carefully looked at the old trash. A spear with a large shaft and a homemade forged tip, a hatchet almost worn out to the butt, a homemade axe, you can only chop off branches with it, skis knocked out with a camas, hose, details of a weaving mill, a spindle with a stone spindle. Now all this has been dumped unnecessarily. Hemp was planted most likely out of habit. They brought fabrics here. They won't wear out for a long time. And a lot of other things are stuck under the roof and lies under a canopy near the stream, a skein of wire, 5 pairs of boots, sneakers, an enamel saucepan, a shovel, a saw, rubberized pants, a roll of tin, 4 sickles. It's good. You can't live a century. Karbasipovich, who came up in his felt boots, sighed inaudibly. Taking off his hat, he prayed towards the 2 crosses. The kingdom of heaven, they no longer need sickles or axes. The old man showed me a storage shed on 2 high pillars to protect food from mice and bears, a cellar where potatoes were kept, a stone fireplace at the very threshold of the hut, where Agafia was cooking dinner on a small fire. I got a good look at the roof of the shack. It was not sketched out in disarray, as it seemed at first. Large blocks looked like gutters and were laid like tiles on European houses. The nights in the mountains here are cold. We didn't have a tent. Agafia and her father, watching how we were going and what God sent to lie down near the fire, invited us to spend the night in a hut. The first day's impressions must be finished with its description. Bending under the jamb of the door, we found ourselves in almost total darkness. The evening light was blue only in a window the size of 2 hands. When Agafia lit and secured a torch in the light, which stood in the middle of the dwelling, one could somehow make out the inside of the hut. The walls were dark even with the torch. The soot of many years did not reflect the light. The low ceiling was also charcoal dark. Poles for drying clothes hung horizontally from the ceiling. Flush with them along the walls were shelves lined with birch bark dishes filled with dried potatoes and pine nuts. Down along the walls were wide benches. On them, as could be understood by some rags, slept and could now sit. To the left of the entrance, the main place was occupied by a wild stone stove. The pipe from the stove, also made of stone tiles, faced with clay and strapped with birch bark, exited not through the roof, but from the side of the wall. The stove was small, but it was a Russian stove with a 2-stage top. On the lower step, on a bed of dry marsh grass, the head of the house slept and sat. Above, large and small birch bark boxes were again piled up. To the right of the entrance stood another stove on legs. A metal one. The bent pipe from her also went to the side through the wall. In winter, it was possible to freeze the wolves here. Well, they cooked this potbelly stove for them. I am surprised how they dragged me, said Agafia, who had already spent the night here more than once. In the middle of the dwelling stood a small table, worked by an axe. That's all there was. But it was cramped. The area of the kennel was about 7 steps by 5, and one could only guess how 6 adults of both sexes huddled here for many years. They were in distress. The old man and Agafia spoke without tension and with pleasure. But often the conversation was interrupted by their impulses to pray immediately. Turning into the corner, where, apparently, there were icons invisible in the dark, the old man and his daughter sang prayers loudly, groaned, sighed noisily, fingering the hillocks of the ladders. The instrument on which the bows were counted. The prayer ended abruptly as it began, and the conversation flowed again from the point where it had been interrupted. At the appointed hour, the old man and his daughter sat down to dinner. They ate potatoes, dipping them in coarse salt. The grains of salt from their knees were carefully collected by the eaters and placed in a salt shaker. Agafia asked the guests to bring their own mugs and poured cedar milk into them. The drink, prepared in cold water, resembled milk tea in color and was perhaps delicious. Agafia made it in front of our eyes. She ground the nuts in a stone mortar, mixed them with water in a birch bark dish, strained. Agafia had no concept of purity. The earthy colored rag through which the food was squeezed served the hostess at the same time for wiping her hands. But what could be done? We drank the milk and, giving Agafia obvious pleasure, sincerely praised the drink. After dinner, questions about the bath somehow spontaneously arose. The Lykovs did not have a bath. They didn't wash. "We can't do that," said the old man. Agafia corrected her grandfather, saying that she and her sister occasionally washed in a dugout trough when it was possible to warm the water in the summer. They also occasionally washed their clothes in the same water, adding ash to it. Neither broom nor broom had ever touched the floor in the hut. The floor bounced underfoot. And when Nikolai Ustinovich and I were spreading an army raincoat tent on it, I took a pinch of the cultural layer to examine outside the door by the light of a flashlight what it consists of. The carpet on the floor consisted of potato husks, pine nut husks, and a hemp fire. On the soft floor, without undressing, we lay down, putting our backpacks under our heads. Arafay, stretched out to his full height on the bench, relatively soon announced with a snore that he was sleeping. Karp-Osipovich, not parting with his felt boots, lay down, slightly breaking the grass featherbed with his hands, on the stove. Agafia put out the torch and curled up, without undressing, between the table and the stove. Contrary to expectations, no one ran on our bare feet and tried to drink blood. Moving away from people here, the Lykovs managed, probably, to sneak away unnoticed from the eternal companions of man, for whom the absence of a bath, soap and warm water would be prosperity. Or maybe hemp played a role. In our village, I remember, hemp was used against fleas and bedbugs. The window had already begun to shine faintly with the July morning light, but I still did not sleep. In addition to people, 2 cats with 7 kittens were found in the dwelling, for whom the night is the best time to take walks in all the nooks and crannies. The bouquet of smells and the staleness of the air were so high that it seemed as if a spark flashed here by chance, and everything would explode, scattered to the sides of the logs and birch bark. I could not resist, crawled out of the hut to breathe. There was a big moon over the taiga. And the silence was absolute. Leaning my cheek against the cold woodpile, I thought, will all this be real? Yes, everything was real. Karp-Osipovich came out to urinate. And we stood with him for a quarter of an hour talking about space travel. I asked, does Karp-Osipovich know that there were people on the moon, walked there and rode in chariots? The old man said that he had heard about it many times, but he did not believe it. The month is a divine luminary. Who, except gods and angels, can fly there? And how can you walk and ride upside down? I ask you to share these videos in your social networks, using the buttons under the video and subscribe to the channel. I ask you to go and watch other videos about Agafia Lykova, which you now see on the screen in the end screensavers.